This over. Hi, everybody. It's Dana Brigman. We're here tonight talking about nutrition and wellness for our dogs. So as we move into this, I want you guys to feel comfortable asking questions as we go. I'm not always good at seeing them if they get really busy and start scanning the screen super fast, but I'll try to pause periodically and cover what questions we have as we go. And then at the end, I will cover any questions for as long as it takes to have them answered. So one of the things that I want everybody to understand is that all of the things that we are dealing with our pets can be supported with better nutrition. Now, I am not coming at this with a judgment point of view. I know many people are in the need to stay with a kibble-based diet, or they're uncomfortable making that leap of faith into the unknown. We have all lived with kibble for pretty much our whole lives, our whole adult lives of feeding our pets. And so I'm going to talk to you about things that you can put in the bowl today that will help start to increase the nutritional value of whatever you're feeding, and then talk to you about how you might start to move up the so-called food ladder of quality and moving yourself into a certainly more nutrient-rich or evolutionary appropriate type diet for our canines. They are carnivores. They need to eat meat. And we'll talk about that. As I share this information, please understand there really is no judgment. This is just education. And from that education, you then begin to take the steps that you can and feel comfortable with moving into your dog's own nutrition. I know for me personally, their nutrition shifted before mine has. I work at making my improvements in my diet every single day. It's a tough thing to do. So how many of you, so we've got a few people on here now, how many of you have typically heard that feeding people food is bad for our dogs, that we shouldn't feed people food? And how many of you still don't do that, right? So I know that I always heard as an adult, we should never feed people food, but as a kid, that's what our dogs ate, right? I grew up out on the farm, and whatever was left over from supper is what the dogs got. And generally speaking, that's a healthier diet than some of the kibble brands that are on the market today. So if we're staying in that category of feeding those foods, adding some people food, anything that is fresh to the bowl starts to add nutrient and can help reduce the potential risk of disease and perhaps increase the longevity of our pets. I just this weekend met a cat. Unfortunately, he's not doing well today, but he was at the workshop where we were doing our raindrop certification, and this cat, y'all, is 30 years old. Right? They know this because they know how old the son was when they got the cat, and the son is now 40 years old. So they've had this cat a long time, and he ate a high quality raw diet really his whole life, which mostly included things he found out in the field, right? He saw the vet very infrequently, really was not vaccinated. And this cat's doing exceptionally well. So I'm not advising you to go feed your animals field mice every day, or to never take them to the vet, but we really got to start to understand what's going on, which is kind of the purpose of tonight. So if we think about adding in fresh leafy greens, kale, broccoli, so broccoli, I guess it's not a leafy green, it's cruciferous, but kale, spinach, other leafy collard greens, even things of that nature, and then moving into more of the cruciferous vegetables like broccoli or Brussels sprouts, we can reduce the potential risk of disease for our pets by up to 70%. That's huge. So I'm happy to throw in some people food into the dog's diet on a periodic basis, if that kind of nutrition just going on top of kibble can add that level of benefit, right? Remember that when you add any sort of vegetables to your pet's diet, they currently, based on how the systems of the body work, because they have been fed kibble for so many years and have not gotten these live vegetables, these real foods, their bodies don't make the digestive enzymes necessary to break down and extract out the nutrient from real food. That's a big deal, right? So many people think, well, I'm going to change from kibble and I'm going to feed my dog a home-cooked meal, right? I'm going to feed my dog a home-cooked meal. And they often start with skinless chicken, brown rice or white rice, and some vegetables. Unfortunately, those vegetables are often peas and carrots, which are very starchy. And so we're really not getting the nutrition that we need out of that home-cooked meal. I think in many respects, it's better than some of the kibble brands that are out there. We're going to cover labels here in a second. But certainly moving into a home-prepared food where our intention is better and the carbs and additives and all of those things are better, but there's certainly more things that we can do. So add in fresh leafy greens, add in fresh yellow vegetables. When we start adding in chicken, it needs to include the skin. So most people are thinking skinless chicken, right? And actually, our pets need fat. So when we take the fat away by taking the skin away, we're actually creating an imbalance in the makeup of protein to fat. So that's a big deal, right? So there becomes this science to this. There becomes all of these calculations that need to be made to make sure that your dog's diet in balance. The interesting thing about our bags of kibble is that mathematically, they're in balance. Scientifically, they're in balance, but they may not be nutrient rich. And we'll cover that here in just a minute, okay? Be careful with the things like peas and carrots. They are really, in essence, starches. Peas can also start to move into a protein category and, again, start to create an imbalance in the ratios of all that's appropriate in the diet. So, any questions about what we're covering so far? You're hearing now that we've been on this grain-free kick at least 20 years, right? I know as an adult moving into some of the rescue groups, it was really the first time that I was hearing about we should be feeding grain-free. And everybody said, yes, let's feed grain-free. And we did. What we're hearing now is that grain-free is starting to show some trends of perhaps not being the best idea. We're seeing, they've done studies in golden retrievers where a taurine deficiency, which is basically a mineral deficiency, is starting to expose risk of cardiodilated myopathy. I lost 2 Great Danes to DCM. Sorry, it's dilated cardiomyopathy, DCM. And I can't help but wonder if there is some correlation to that as well. So the study was done on retrievers, but I don't think it's limited to that. So we probably do need to look at having foods that include some variants of grains, appropriate grains, into that diet. And so this doesn't mean that you have to have the food balanced perfectly every single day, right? it may balance itself out over the course of the week. We shouldn't be trying to balance it over the course of a month, but we should be trying to create some balance within a shorter time period. If we as humans are eating appropriately, we don't eat the same things every day, and we might eat more protein one day and more vegetables the next, but ideally over the course of our week, our plate becomes balanced. So another thing that you can add to your dog's diet as a zhuzh up of the kibble would be an egg, right? The whole egg. Just crack it open, put it on top of the food, give them the shell and all. So my dogs will crunch the shell like it's a special treat, right? Some dogs, you may have to run it through the pureer while you're doing the puree of those blanched vegetables, okay? When we start adding meat is where things get really tricky, right? So if you say, I want my dog to be on a raw diet, but I can't make that total leap into raw, but I'm just going to throw some raw hamburger at him or some raw chicken or some raw venison or whatever it may be, and you start doing that regularly, you're actually throwing off the balance of something in the mineral systems of phosphorus and calcium, right? So now that could be a bad thing. That could be a really bad thing, right? We've got the balance in the kibble. We start adding in meat, and we're only adding in the protein. So we're now missing adding in the right other minerals to go back to balance. So this becomes, like I said, a very scientific equation of figuring out what it is that your dog is supposed to eat to get a balanced diet, which is why many people say, I can't go raw. I was somewhat in that category. I lived in the space of I can't afford it, and I lived in the space of it is way too hard to calculate. So that's really kind of what led me down the path to the Volhard food that I feed. And we'll talk more about that as we go. Okay. So let's just talk a little bit about reading the label. I want to get into this category of kibble and help you understand some of the basics about that. So if you printed, or if you can go back and look at the graphic that I shared just prior to the video starting, on the side of every bag is something called the guaranteed analysis. And this is required by all of the manufacturers to disclose how the makeup of what's in the bag is calculated, right? We'll talk about the ingredients next. But if you look at this guaranteed analysis, there are 4 primary things that you need to add up: crude protein, crude fat, crude fiber, and moisture. So if you're looking at the bag that I shared, it has 27% protein, 16% fat, 5% fiber, and 10% moisture. So that adds up to, let's see, I can't even do math. 11, 38, 48%. Correct me if I'm wrong, y'all. Is that 48 or 58%? Might be 58%. Anyway, you take that number and subtract it from 100%. The difference, right, the difference left is actually carbohydrates in the bag. Sugars, if you will. It doesn't mean it's cane white sugar, but they are carbohydrates, and they are not necessarily healthy carbohydrates. So what do we know about cancer? It lives off of sugar. And we know that right now, slightly more than 50% of our dogs are being diagnosed and dying from cancer every year. And that's super scary to me, right? I mean, like I said, I watched 2 Great Danes with dilated cardiomyopathy. I've watched family members get sick, and that's what's really put me on this path. And living with my clients and seeing many of them struggle with issues with their pets, even if it's just skin conditions, right? I'm like, there has to be some solution to all of this. So this is really what has set me down this path of learning more about nutrition and wellness, is how does it affect our behavior? How does it affect, longevity and all of those things? So this bag of dog food is actually puppy food. It was here with one of my clients whose puppy was here boarding for the weekend. And so I snapped a picture of this. So if any of you have looked at your bag, have you seen numbers that are alarming to you? Really, the least I have found in any bag, even the higher quality bags of food, is down around 40% carbohydrate. They stay pretty strong in the carbohydrate category. If we move and look at the ingredients, this is where things now start to become more about this marketing engine, right? The marketers have gotten really smart and say, we're now as consumers looking at the first ingredient. And so they're wanting that ingredient to be a meat, an animal-based protein. And so on most bags, it is. I found one in Tractor Supply a couple weeks ago that scared the crap out of me. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe people are still feeding this. And it was corn, all sorts of starches as the first several ingredients of food. And I'm like, oh my God, those poor animals. And yet we know that some animals, just like some people, will live to be 112 years old, smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, and eating crappy food, right? They have good genetics that offset that. But when we look at 50% of the population not doing well with those things, then we have to make some changes. So if you look at this label of deboned chicken and then moving into chicken meal, you see the next three ingredients are carbohydrates and, frankly, grains of some sort. Oats are not a bad grain. Barley is not a bad grain. In fact, that goes back to where we may need to be getting some of our taurine from, right? But what you start to see is protein showing up in the peas. You can see further down on this, pea protein showing up. They're listed in the order of percent of total ingredient. But what you have to start to do is add them together. So if I found multiple instances of protein, I have to add those together, and it might exceed the total percentage of the first ingredient. So does that make sense? You might see 3 other sources of protein besides the first ingredient. And what we don't know is when we add them together, does it become more than the animal protein? And it's totally possible that it does, especially some of these lesser quality foods. The other thing that I will point out here, and I learned this from Rodney Habib, I don't know if you follow him, where you find salt on the label, remember things are listed in the order of the percentage of that item that's in the bag. So there can only be 1% salt in any dog food. That's the max permissible by one of the governing bodies of control and nutrition for animals. Salt can only be 1%. So anything you see after salt is less than 1%. So look at all the other things that start to come in there, right? Sometimes on this one, it tends to move into where the vitamins and minerals and things are, but you'll start to see for many of the foods, you will see, well, here we're seeing sweet potatoes and carrots and what else do we see in there? Kelp. Right? What is 1% kelp or less going to do to help us nutritionally? Probably not a whole lot. I actually love, there's a supplement that I use with animals when they seem to be deficit in nutrient. We're trying to beef that back up. That's called multigreens. And it's rich in all those green supplements. I take it myself because I know I don't often get enough of those green vegetables we talked about at the start of the conversation. So I want you to learn to read those bags and go do a little bit more analysis than just the first ingredient. The other thing that I want you to think about is in these bags, these foods have been cooked at very high temperatures. All the moisture had been pulled out of it to cook them really, and then moisture is added back in. We also know that the cooking process will significantly decrease, if not eliminate, the vitamins and minerals that are necessary for us to sustain our lives. And so what happens here is they add back vitamins and minerals, but more often than not, it's a synthetic form of those vitamins and minerals. It's better to have synthetic than none, but most of the time with a synthetic, it's all going out the back end, right? They're not absorbing as much as they should. And without those vitamins and minerals keeping things in the balance of the body that it needs, especially as it ages, or especially as it becomes potentially unwell, right? So if we start seeing dogs in health condition issues surfacing, we might need to reset or rearrange what vitamins and minerals and supplements they're getting. And we certainly don't want them to be synthetic, right? So just be aware of those things. We also see a fair amount of preservatives in these foods, okay? Even as we move up into what some people call a natural kibble, so think these boutiques that are selling higher end brands of food, they're marketed often as natural kibble. We still have some issues there with artificial preservatives. Let me rephrase that. This is where we start to see artificial preservatives start to be removed from the bag, and they're using more natural ones like rosemary and vitamin E as natural preservatives in the bag. But we still often find that they are using lots of potatoes or rice or tapioca. So looking back at that bag that I showed you on the list of ingredients, what you see is the very last ingredient is oil of rosemary. And I have this here. I'm seeing both screens right now, so I'm pointing at this and you all can't see it. Oil of rosemary is listed as the last ingredient. That is the natural preservative that's put into this bag, right? But we also see that this has a lot of rice, oatmeal, barley. We found potatoes in there. We found carrots. We found peas, which really, again, y'all, that's a lot of starch. That's a lot of starch. And when I look at puppies, and the puppy that's eating this food is bouncing off the flipping walls. He is almost unmanageable. And so if we look at chicken being a very frequent allergen, we look at the percentage of protein, total protein going into the body, and we look at all the quote unquote sugar going into the body. I think a food change for this particular dog will change his activity and bounce off the wall level. I believe that to be true. Okay. So moving up this so-called food ladder, we get into canned diets. They are often better than the kibble-based diets because the meats in these products have been cooked less. They haven't been so-called overcooked, right? They certainly contain a lot more moisture in a canned food than you would find in a kibble food. And so, Randy, going back to what you were asking about Dolly, the fact that she's eating a wetter food and you're adding in some moisture to the food on top of that, it could be that she's getting her volume of water as she eats versus drinking it from a secondary bowl. So it would be worth noting how much actual water are you adding, and kind of keeping tabs on that. Putting out a bowl of water and monitoring exactly how much she's drinking from there. Start to actually measure and see what's going on. The absence of drinking water could be an indicator of some other health issue. And certainly so can the excess of drinking water, right? What I want to tell you about canned diets is that many people believe that they are less expensive. They're really not, right? They're not, and often they are more expensive certainly than kibble, and they are not necessarily less expensive than the raw foods that might be available to you in other formats. You have to also be careful of these rolls of food. So sometimes people are purchasing rolls of raw or wet foods, right? Sometimes the wet food in these rolls is not raw at all. It is just canned food in a different form. So you must pay attention to that. You must read the labels. What can happen though in many of those labels, those rolls, right? The plastic that they are wrapped in often contains BPA. BPA is a known endocrine disruptor, which when we start interfering with the hormones of the body, we start to have behavioral issues and health issues, right? Many of us won't necessarily see hormone disruptions because our pets have been spayed and neutered, right? So we don't know that they're not able to reproduce. We don't know that they're not having regular cycles for the females, and we don't know that the males aren't able to impregnate the females because they never have an opportunity to do that. But certainly with the spay and neuter, we've disrupted the hormones in the first place. And in many cases, it's happening way too soon in their developmental periods. Again, no judgment to my rescue people. I know what we're trying to do when we spay and neuter, but I am seeing rescue groups do this, y'all, at 6 to 8 weeks. Spay and neuter, that's horrible in my mind from a developmental point of view and a behavioral point of view. So that's a risk. So be aware of the plastics that you see things wrapped in, or even the liner within a can. There's often a plastic liner that is attached to the can wall to prevent it from rusting. Those are often BPA plastics, which can be problematic. In our canned food and in these tubes of food, there is a thickening agent called carrageenan. Carrageenan is used in science, in laboratories, to actually create inflammation in the bowel so that they can produce medications and drugs to help fight inflamed bowel disease or whatever that might be called, right? So we're putting that food, a known bowel inflammatory, into these products that we're then feeding our dogs and wondering why they're having digestive issues. So if you've got a dog that is not regular, his poop might be loose, his poop might be too hard, his poop might be irregular, any of those things, you got to step back and look at the digestion, not necessarily the fact that it's just canned food, but any food that you're feeding. If what's coming out the back end is not consistent, well-formed, pretty poop, so to speak, we've got an issue that needs to be addressed in that GI tract, the digestive tract, and so on. Okay. And just know that, you know, when you sit down and really do the calculation, canned food is likely to wind up costing you more per pound than a good raw quality food would. It certainly costs you more than kibble, but it's likely to be more expensive than you think. So I see a couple of questions. Let me see what they say. Laura says, does it make a difference whether I boil the chicken thighs or give to the dog raw? It does make a difference, Laura, in that typically raw is better. We know that some dogs do better with their systems with lightly cooked food, but you should never give a bone to the animal that has been cooked. The meat might be cooked, but the bone should never be cooked, okay? But the more we cook things, the more potential there is for it not to have the same health benefit that it would otherwise. Many people question, is raw safe? You know, is it actually safe to give a dog raw food? If your dog is unwell, then we might have a problem with bacteria going into the gut. If your dog is well, then their systems are designed to be challenged by that bacteria to keep the gut healthy. So when we're making these transitions between food types, and that's whether you go from kibble to canned or kibble to raw or to home cooked, it doesn't matter where you transition. Each transition may need some supportive care in the digestive system to get them moved to where they need to be. One of my clients, her dog has an autoimmune issue, and we started that dog on Volhard, and she ate the raw for a few days, and then she said, don't want it anymore. And so we did a light cooking. So we lightly cooked the meat, and the dog started eating it again. So the dog knew better than we did that the stomach wasn't tolerating the complete raw. So we're going to go with a light cook for a while, and then that owner's probably going to try the raw again in some transitionary phase. So, Laura, your question about getting the meat off the bone, your dog won't care. Give him the whole thing, right? But if you are having issues with resource guarders or multiple dogs, then certainly giving them bones around each other could be a risk, you know, things of that nature. But ideally, they get the meat and the bone together, uncooked. Remember that chicken is often an inflammatory meat. It is also in Chinese medicine a hot meat. Doesn't mean temperature, it means how it fuels the body. And so for dogs who have itchy, scratchy skin, goopy ears, gunky eyes, bad attitudes, chicken might not be the right protein. And that would need to be reviewed, you know, to see what makes the most sense. Part of why Volhard uses hamburger meat is because hamburger is a neutral food. It's neither hot nor cold. And so it's a good place to start to figure out how the body begins to adjust. Oh, so Randy, yeah, if you're adding that much water and I think you called it soup in your earlier post, then she probably doesn't need to drink more because she's ingested so much at mealtime. You can look, you know, at, if you lift the skin on the back of her neck, you know how you can pull up sort of that excess a little bit. If it stays up, that's an indication of some dehydration. If you lift it and it flops right back down and it goes into place very quickly, she's likely not dehydrated. Yeah. So Laura, you might be trying to overthink all of this, right? You might be trying to overthink what your dog would do with his canine teeth. Okay. Rachel says, I feed my dogs raw organic food from a local farm. They add in vitamins and minerals. I wonder if my dogs are absorbing the added vitamins and minerals. The market adds in vitamins and minerals to the meat they're sending home with you. You would need to ask them, you really need to figure out how much and what, and are they using synthetic vitamins and minerals as the additive? That's the big question about that. Yeah, you can rotate the proteins, Laura. You absolutely can. That's fine. And as long as they're not having a reaction to the chicken, then I think that's okay. The thing about organ meat, so Laura brings up a question about feeding gizzards and organs. Vary the organs as well. When we feed organ meat, if you were actually doing the calculations of feeding protein and organs and bone and all the other things that you would do in a true raw model, 5% or less of total diet should be organs. 5% or less. So be careful about feeding too much organ meat. I will also say that when we start looking at dogs with wellness issues, we look at how like supports like. So remember that. Like supports like. So if your dog is starting to look like they have liver issues, like the liver may not be functioning as well, or liver enzymes are off, kidney enzymes are off, we may not be in disease state yet, right? You might want to support those systems of the body by adding in some animal liver from other animals, right? So support the liver with liver, support the kidney with kidneys. Think cows, ideally think younger animals, because the younger animals have had less, they've been exposed less to environmental toxins that would then go back into your dog as a result of eating an older animal, if that makes sense. So if you've got a true health issue, then you start looking at those things. And again, not a veterinarian here. These might be things that you discuss with your vet about, and follow blood work and testing and see what things are happening. But you should never go more than 5% into the organ category. If you are looking to add organs to your dog's diet, I use the beef liver that I used to order from Chewy, but I don't support PetSmart anymore. And you can order it from Amazon as well. But Dr. Jody Gruenstein has a product called Trail Mix that has hearts and kidneys and liver and even brain in it as a dehydrated product. So many people are going to be like, oh my God, I can't feed that to my dog, right? It's dehydrated. You wouldn't know really which pieces are which. From young animals, right? The reality of our world is that those animals are there and they're part of the food source. And so she's taken those organ meats from other companies that aren't using them, dehydrating them and putting them into the food system for our pets. So that's a good option for that. Okay. Laura, I'm going to come back to your questions in a minute. Hang on one second. Can you do ground turkey too instead of hamburger? Yes, you can. Remember with turkey, Brandy, that turkey contains tryptophan. It's why we all take a nap on Thanksgiving Day, right? So I have seen many dogs that are seemingly less energetic than their age and their breed might suggest they should be, right? And it's because they're eating turkey. When we change the diet, the behaviors start to change and they get more energetics and more into the breed instincts that they're supposed to have because the body feels better. So as a rotation, I think it's fine. As a do turkey every single day, no, that's not what I would do. And many people, when they're feeding kibble, will try to go in that poultry category, and they often find themselves still in a poultry allergy or still with some less than active dogs when they really should be far more active for their age. So Randy, if she's not drinking out of her water dish, change the bowl. Many dogs get funky about the bowl size, whether their collars, if it's metal bowl and the collars plank against the metal bowl, change the bowl. Move to, if it's not stainless steel, go to stainless steel. If it is, go to ceramic and see if that will help her. Okay, so I'm going back to Laura for a second. Yeah, so change the protein for Randy. If he doesn't like the Volhard hamburger, you absolutely change the protein. That's fine. Just vary them. Don't get stuck on one. Poppy eats 2/3 of a cup hamburger. No, that's wrong. Poppy eats 1/3 cup hamburger and 1/3 cup mix twice a day. If we have had a much more active outing, like taking her to the beach or a big play date with some of the other dogs here, I might increase that to a 1/2 cup of each. Okay. Brandy, we did touch on the heart issues. We talked about, certainly in the Volhard food, there are grains, there are millet, and there are oats in there. So this notion of sticking to these total grain-free diets is probably not what every dog needs. Some dogs might need it more than others. Certainly if we're trying to identify what's causing the itchy skin or the goopy eyes or the inflammation in the body, we may need to do an elimination to figure that out. But getting them back into some level of grain for a vitamin and mineral balance is probably appropriate for most dogs. And then again, making sure that those vitamins and minerals are not synthetic. So if you have a specific question about that, Brandy, let me know. And Laura, yes, absolutely. I give Huey and Howie less. They eat about 2 tablespoons total food twice a day. They're only 12 to 14 pounds each. All the products from Volhard are human grade foods made in a human grade plant, for production. So you could try it. You could try it. But yeah, everything is top quality, non-GMO, human grade products that go in to make up that food. Okay. So let's see. What else can I tell you? What other questions do you guys have? I can tell you that I have seen tremendous results with people making switches into home prepared meals. Some people are willing to do the full home prep. Like they'll spend an entire Sunday and make a month's worth of food, start freezing it and pulling out the pieces that they need as they need. I am a terrible grocery shopper. I do not like trying to calculate recipes like the 80% organ, 80% protein and the 5% organ and whatever else. I can send you the calculations if you need them. If you want to do that, I'll tell you how. It's not my thing. But certainly, no matter where you are, if you're still in the kibble category, start looking where you can add some freshness to the bowl. And that should be true for all of us, right? No matter what we're eating. I'm on the go a lot. I'm traveling to appointments and clients frequently. And so I feel like I hit the drive-through far too often. So I beef up my vitamins and minerals and my multigreens that I told you about, and especially on those days. And I try to drink green juices and, you know, that sort of stuff on the way out the door. So really trying to get all of this improved for myself, but it's the same principles for our dogs. Again, we've often thought they don't need people food. And really, that's exactly what they do need. They need high quality, nutrient-rich, fresh, real foods, either raw or lightly cooked. And when I say lightly, I mean like a minute, just to sort of heat up the outsides of things. And then the vegetables should basically be pureed to give them more of a chance of the systems of the body being able to digest them. If you are making a transition from from kibble into home cooked or to raw of any level, you're going to need to add digestive enzymes. They're in the Volhard food already. If you have a senior citizen, you might find yourself needing to increase digestive enzymes to add an additional amount, a boosted amount. I noticed that Howie's probably close to 15. And I noticed that around his ears, around the outside of his ears, it looked like the hair was starting to recede. So if you, we'll do more classes, but if you think about this traditional Chinese medicine thing, the kidneys are associated, or the ears are associated with the kidney, the eyes are associated with the liver, right? So again, we start saying what system of the body might not be performing as well as it should. And as we age, things change. And so I said, well, I need to maybe zhuzh up his vitamins and minerals that support that category, or the foods that support that category. And so I've added a product called K&B tincture to his diet. And I've added some organ meat to his diet and additional digestive enzymes. And the hair seems to be growing back, even at 15. So I'm hoping that he's going to be like the cat I shared with you guys. You know, that cat's almost 30 years old, which just absolutely blows my mind. Do I think that's likely? Probably not, but I'm certainly going to do everything I can, which is really why I got onto this path in the first place, is I wanted to do the very best that I could. Plus, I love the learning. So Brandy says, I'm using the additive from Volhard and have been loving it because I can add it to my home meal and add it and know that they're getting their vitamins. Pixie has done well. Good. Awesome. Brandy has a new puppy that she's raising. All right, so we've talked about the organ meat. We talked about vitamins and minerals. We talked about enzymes. We really didn't talk about omegas. Your dog needs omegas. If you wind up in a category of feeding all fish or all chicken or all turkey, you've got to come back and balance the omegas. Omega-3 we think about. Do we need omega-6 and omega-9? Yeah, we probably do. And so where are we getting those nutrients? And so again, if you're thinking about these home prepared foods, then you may need to add in those supplements to support that. Be careful with fish oil supplements or omega supplements. Many of them, because it became such a popular thing, everybody was saying, just like grain-free, we need fish oil. And unfortunately, there are some companies out there without integrity and without the protection of the environmental trouble that they're causing. They're not leaving the environment better than they found it as they harvest these oils. And so that's an issue. There are companies that do sustainable harvesting and replace and help support the environment, replace what we're taking from it. So just be aware of those things. What else can I tell you? I hope this is at least helpful to get you on the path of starting. As we move into behavior, what I do often now is talk to my clients about their diets. Again, not a veterinarian here, but what is that dog eating? Have you had blood work with your vet done? and if there are some likely categories of needing to support systems of the body due to environmental exposures or vaccination exposures or bad diet exposure, which is often the case for many of the animals that we have rescued, right? We don't know what their life was like prior to them being with us. For some of them, we see them come in emaciated, really undernourished. And so obviously the first steps are getting those dogs healthy, getting them back into a good space, but we may need to look at helping to support them with cleansing diets. Just like we do cleanses for ourselves, there are dietary ways and supplemental ways to help cleanse the systems of your dog's body, sort of reset everything, and then help them continue on with good nutritional programs. So lots and lots and lots of options available. What other questions does anybody have? So don't shy away from real food. If you are interested in chatting about this more one-on-one, we can set up some wellness consultations. If you're interested in supplements, I can talk to you about that. I think Young Living and Volhard both have some of the best supplements available. They are my go-to resources. I can send you information about that, and you can do some research on which ones make sense for your pet. If you do go with any of the Volhard products, I would ask that you use my affiliate. And the easiest way to do that right now is just go to Volhard Dog Nutrition. And when you check out, add my name, Dana Brigman, all one word, don't put any spaces in it, Dana Brigman, as the coupon code, and that'll link it back to me. But I'll post the link, my affiliate link, down below later. Remember, this post, this Facebook is going to be only live about 24 hours. And then it'll move to a on request in a private YouTube space for people to have access to. If you are interested at all in essential oils, which can really start to help the systems of the body function well, even help with digestive issues, there's a lot of things that can be done that way. I can help you get started in those programs as well. If you have questions, let me know. It looks like everybody's sort of fading away, and we are at 10 o'clock. So I appreciate your time. And if I can do anything to help you, just let me know. Last call for questions. Okay, bye.